So
That's a good thing. Maybe
you sound like
some
my
young
balabatim. My
anorexic.
balabatim chat me all day about this. They think I'm out of my mind.
Are you
You know what?
feeling
I
okay?
wanted to
Everybody
try
wants
something
to
that was
know.
hard.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. My father had the same
That's
reaction as you. And
Well,
he lives in Eretz Yisrael.
probably not visiting you anymore.
that's not well. I'm sorry, but it sounds not Hasidish for sure. Not even maybe even Litvish. It sounds a little bit monasterial.
Listen, everything difficult should be tried once. Are we starting the oilam?
Yeah,
It's late. I don't want to
we
give
are.
the oilam.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to start. I want to, for those who don't know, Rabbi Moshe Taub was originally in Buffalo. He's originally from Toronto. And Tu Bshvat is important to remember our roots. And Rabbi Taub, on a regular basis, mentions Toronto in his article. He mentioned Rabbi Blaustein recently, El Rishon, and he mentions growing up in Toronto. I do want to discuss a little bit, if we have time at the end, how this last article he spoke about Parshas Hamon. It didn't go over well in certain parts, and we want to discuss that as well. But if you read his article about the Shul Chronicles, it breaks down the concept of what the difference between minhag and halacha on a weekly basis. For many of us, it continuously merges, but Rabbi Taub has the ability to really bring clarity to the issue. From Rishonim, from Achronim, his research is impeccable. I highly suggest to read it when you pick up Ami magazine on Shabbos. If you do, start from the end. And go ahead, Rabbi Taub.
I didn't know it was going to be. I'm going to have to justify and defend an article on Mun. So I'm going to try these up all my time so everybody goes home before then. Um, my roots, grad, I was born in New York. I moved to Toronto when I was 3 or 4. And just parenthetically, I was by the Bayit for a Shabbos. Is anybody there from the Bayit right now? No, right? And what I say now is not going to go back, right? Good. Um, it's Toronto's it's a whole different Toronto, a whole different Toronto and a whole different Thornhill. It was certain things have stayed the same along Bathurst, Chocolate Charm, Video Invasions is now, I don't know, Hartman's or something else. But it was, I realized I had to go back to Toronto when one of my kids, who's a teenager, said, Daddy, I've never been to Toronto. And me and my wife is Nechama Levin, or Mordechai Levin's daughter. We looked at each other. Our teenage daughter never was visited Toronto. My eldest daughters went to Camp Aguda when we lived in Buffalo and we lived in Queens. And my daughter Malka Dina, some of her best friends are from Toronto and Davin Aguda, actually, including Chani Menzelovsky, which is my Malka Dina's sister, Kemat. Okay, let's talk a little about Tu B'Shvat. So I'll just, there's so much to say about Tu B'Shvat. It's such a strange day because it's not mentioned really in Chazal other than the first Rosh Hashanah. And it's not as a practice for us. It's not mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch because it is mentioned in Chazal, different Gemaras for halachic purposes. But in the Shulchan Aruch, other than Tachnun, it doesn't really come up. The Magen Avram shares with us a minhag. He's not the one who introduced the minhag. It was Rabbi Yisachar Susan. I'm going to be looking at my notes a little bit to remember all the names. It was Rabbi Yisachar Susan. He lived in the 15th, 16th century, that we should have fruits on Tu B'Shvat. I remember Malcolm Levine, I'm assuming, still davens in Aguda, Rabbi Levine. So I remember him coming to
Yes, very
Chaim
much.
with Boxer. Do you remember Boxer? It is the most inedible. I don't know why you would make a shechianu. I mean, maybe a dayin ha'emes. It was the most disgusting thing in Eitz Chaim every year. Every year we would have Boxer fruit. But so it's the Magen Avram who brings this minhag into the public stratosphere, and it blew up into the stratosphere. Everybody, and then it extended to making a shechiyanu. So I want to point out a few things. First of all, why we make a shechiyanu? It's not brought in the Magen Avram on Tu B'Shvat. That's not brought in the Magen Avram. The Mishnah Brura says something very interesting in Hilchos Brachas. He doesn't mention it by Tu B'Shvat. He brings a Yerushalmi, and it's a Pelodic Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says maybe you've heard a story how Rav Hirsch wanted to visit Switzerland, and his Talmidim asked him, Rabbi, why are you wasting time? It's Bittul Torah to go to Schweiz. He said, Achmei v'Esher, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to ask me, no, did you see my Alps? Meaning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to have enjoyment in every one of his briyas. So, in the end of the fourth parak in the Yerushalmi and Kedushin, it says, Amar Rabbi Bun, B'Shem Rav, that every human being will have to give an accounting on all the scrumptious, delicious items. I didn't look at the Art Scroll translation. That's what I wrote. Scrumptious, delicious items. That's my own translation. That Hashem made and you didn't eat. And the Gemara ends it and says, Rabbi Elazar ben Pedas was so obsessed and anxious about this Maimer Chazal that he would gather, he was very poor, Rabbi Elazar ben Padas, but he would gather enough money once a year to seek out as much as he can from the shops and try to, if he heard about a new fruit, a new vegetable, a new dish, a new fricassee, he would lose money on this. And the Mishnah Berurah brings this. If you want to look it up, it's in Siman Reish Chaf Hey, Sefkata on your test. The Mishnah Berurah says that you should try to make a shechianu to fulfill the mitzvah of trying everything HaKadosh Baruch Hu made. It's interesting, but he doesn't mention Tu Bshvat. Halachically, I just want to point out you should speak to Rabbi Lowy, Rabbi Phillips. It's a big shaila today. Satmar Rebbe discusses this, Ramesha discusses this. Today, you could go to Sobeys. I don't know what the big stores are in Toronto anymore, and you could find a nectarine in February. The idea of seasons of fruits, it's not like it was in Europe. The peddler suddenly in May would come to town with citrus fruits, the excitement in the air, biting into a peach for the first time in 9 months. It's a big shiloh today in general. Everybody should speak to their Rav. But I want to speak about something else about this Magen Avram. If you never thought of this before, you're going to kick yourself because the Mishnah says, what is Rosh Chodesh Shvat according to Beis Shammai and Tu Bshvat according to Beis Hillel? It is Rosh Hashanah. The oilam finish up the sentence. Rosh Hashanah lewat? No, Lilanos. And what do we do on the Rosh Hashanah Lilanos? We eat fruit. And when's the Yom Hadin for fruit, for peiros? No, Shavuos. And the Mariel says, the Ramah gives different reasons why we bring Asvei Hasad into the shul. It says the Magen Avram, no, on Shavuos, because it's the din for peiros, you should bring Ilanos into a shul. That's the Magen Avram's reason. So the Magen Avram, think about this, introduces us to two minhagim that to be inverted. They're inverted. The Yom Hadin lepeiros Shavuos, we should be eating fruit. And Malcolm Levine will force feed us boxer fruit. And on Tu Bshvat, the Bayit, I remember Joe Tenenbaum used to sponsor these large, fancy trees every year. We should do that on Tu Bshvat. So it's a good kasha. No, it doesn't fit. So for years and years, I looked. Has anybody asked this kasha? If anybody has a teretz, you could speak out, because I don't know. So I'll give you two mahalchim. One comes from a Chassidish sefer. The very first Sadi Ger Rebbe has a sefer called Emes Liyaakov. And if you look in Tu Bshvat, he asks this kasha, and he says such a beautiful pshat. If you think about it, why is there a Yom Hadin lepeiros? A Yom Hadin lepeiros? Oh, Hashem, my peaches should taste good this year. I mean, maybe for concrete, our houses stand for wood. There are certain things that we live off of for ink, electricity. But of all the things to have a Yom Hadin, so he says like this: we all know that what an Elon is. Elon, Bama V'Rechacha, we are Rebbeim. Every single individual has an influence on other people. There's always someone in this world who emulates you. Everybody has someone like that. And we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Rosh Hashanah Li'ilanos that if I influence anybody, I should have good peiros. I should have good talmidim. And on Shavuos is when we remember, on the Yom Hadin Li'ilanos, when the Rebbeim are being judged, is when we remember that we are all peiros. No matter who we are, no matter how much we've learned or think we've learned, we all have a Rebbeim we look up to. So we beg HaKadosh Baruch Hu and daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the peiros that the Elon should be good. That's the Emes Liyaakov's answer. So that's nice Chassidish teretz. Now let me tell you a Litvish teretz that I came up with. Kiyadua, that the Vilna Gaon, in my house, we never hung up in the sukkah, nice sukkah hanging from the ceiling. My father held like the Gra that you shouldn't have decorations. And I'm still going to therapy because I would come home
About
from
the
school.
walls?
I would come from school with these beautiful
That wall.
decorations, and my father would tell my mother, put it away. No,
Not even on the walls?
on the walls
Not
we
even.
would. And my father had this Hutner-esque minhag. I think he got it from a Hutner when we used to daven Mechai in Berlin and New York, where he would take all the old Torahs from the bayit, all the mantles, and he would. That's what we would hang up the. If you remember when the bayit was on Bevshire Circle, it used to be a house. So when they moved, we yarshened all those things. I think my brother has them now, and we would hang those, but nothing from the ceiling. And the Gaon held that this is chukas akum, and in fact there are other minhagim negei to kratzmach that the Gaon was very careful that we shouldn't, and to Christians I should say, to Nightstream, not to follow. Tu Bshvat falls Xmas time. To bring an Elon for the Magen of Ram to suggest to bring an Elon, think about it, a tree, into our base Hakneses. So the Magen of Ram says, look, it's an Indian. Al pi Kabbalah, the Magen of Ram would, I think, quote the Zohar more than any other of Neisei Kelim. But we can't do it Tu B'Shvat, so we can't erase it. So we'll do it on Shavuos, and for Shavuos we'll do it. So that's my pshat. It's a little bit of a maybe a little bit of a stretch. I'll talk a little bit more about Tu B'Shvat. First of all, it's interesting to note. I was once speaking somewhere in front of a yeshivish crowd. It was in Lakewood, and I got up. I forget what the vart was, but I wanted to mention Bas Pyroi. So everybody knows what was Bas Pyro's name.
Bisya, Basya?
Oh, so I said Bisya, and the oilam started laughing. They thought, what an Amaretz. Now, I am an Amaretz, but on this I wasn't wrong. Her name is only quoted once in Tanakh. It's in Divrei Hayamim, and it's quoted as Bisya. Reb Chaim Kanievsky grad has a sefer on Shemus where he explains why we switched it. But in any event, I mentioned this just derech agav that it's not Tu B'Shvat. Shvat is actually mentioned once in Tanakh, and there's not a patach, there's a kometz. It's Tu B'Shvat. Now, again, you're going to look like a fool, but if you want to do it right, I just thought I'll throw that I'll throw that in there. A couple of things about Tu B'Shvat. Um, how much time do I have? It's already 10:20. You want to just tell me how much longer? I don't want to start something I'm not going to
Up
finish.
to 10 minutes more, but we'll have some questions
You
afterwards.
know what? So I just I want to dedicate. You know what? We'll take questions. Anything else? Yeah. Okay. So I'll end with a quick vart. Okay, not what I was planning on saying, but this will take me 3 minutes to say, and then we could have a geschmacka discussion or whatever you want. I want to dedicate this year to Yoel David for Shlema for Yoel David ben Sarah Rivka. I just got off the phone 10 minutes ago with David Kersner, David and Eve Kersner from Toronto. They don't down by that good, do they?
No.
Eve Kersner, if you know who she is, her brother davens in my shul, and about a week and a half ago he was missing, and he had a stroke at his business. They found him about 5 hours later, and it's just been a very, very difficult a difficult week. I hope I hope I'm not saying tales out of school. So I want to tell you a little bit of a Chassidish Maisa. I was going to share a Maisa with the Baal Shem Tov and Tu B'Shvat and Rav Tenenbaum in Queens with the Chachmei Lublin and Geschmacka Maisa with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, literature yeshivas, but we don't have time. It's going to take me 15 minutes. So I'm going to say this Maisa instead.
You're tempting us. You can't do that.
Well, you know what? You know what? You leave them hungry. What was to tell you?
You know we're going to buy it. It's typical of your articles. You start, I can't, I won't have time, but you say it anyway.
Now you know my articles are a microcosm of dealing with me. My wife always tells me that. I can't finish a conversation. You said I have a few minutes. You want to have questions. Hey, listen to this, Maisa. Eve Kersner, her real last name is Rosenblum. Her brother, my shul, her real last name, her maiden name is Rosenblum. What am I saying? And her brother's Lee Rosenblum. Their father was Professor. Does anybody know who Professor Rosenblum was?
Professor. I think I'm the only one. I'm the only one in Chabadsker here, so I will know.
Every Lubavitcher knows.
Yeah.
And I hope Reb David doesn't mind I'm saying this. Professor Rosenblum is a legend. He was a protege of Albert Einstein, one of the most brilliant mathematicians of the 20th century. He used to carpool in Princeton with Einstein every morning. I remember Professor Rosenblum used to come to the Bayit to when David and Eve lived up there, and he grew up, him and his wife, with really no shaykhs to Yiddishkeit. And when he graduated from Princeton, and I think he spent some time at MIT, he became a professor in University of Minnesota, where the Frierdiker Rebbe sent his first shliach, who's still alive, I believe, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And long story short, he tells Professor Rosenblum, "We should meet this man in Crown Heights." My Lubavitch friends would hear me saying a Maisa with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, they would fall on their faces. Anyway, he goes, he becomes from, it turns out that Professor Rosenblum, Eve Kerzner and Lee Rosenblum's father, had the same birthday as the Rebbe, and they would exchange gifts every year. A lot of those gifts were mathematical equations. I've seen the papers between them. He was the only one who could just walk in. The Rebbe would never greet a woman in the street, ever, except for Mrs. Rosenblum. So when you meet a rabbi, you say rabbi. You meet the wife, you say Rebbitzin. When he met Professor Rosenblum, he would say professor. And to their mother, he would call her Professorka. So one day, Professorka came into the office of the Rebbe and said, the Rebbe urged them to come to Columbia University. You have to make a name for yourself and you'll be Makarav Yidden. In fact, Lee Rosenblum was once, as a kid, riding around in a tricycle in the courtyard, in the quad, as they call it, and his tits were hanging out, and a student from the Netherlands knocks on Professor Rosenblum's door and says, "I have a question." Professor Rosenblum says, "I only see students Thursday nights at 7." He says, "No, no, it's about your son." What did he do now? What are those fringes? I'm Jewish. What? Long story short, this student from the Netherlands is a great grandfather living in Muncie who had a shoe store became from Lee Rosenblum, needs a refuah shlema. So anyway, so back to Professor Rosenblum. She tells the Rebbe, "You told us to move to New York. I have to sign new life insurance. I have no friends yet, and I need someone to sign as the guardian if anything should happen to my children." So the Rebbe took out his pen and said, "Give me the paper," and he signed the paper to be the guardian. So the day after the stroke, I told a member of the family to find that paper, go to the oil, and tell the Rebbe, "You signed a piece of paper. You said you're the guardian. You have to go mitachas kisei hakavod, and you have to beg and beg and beg and take care of your own zin, your own son." And he went the next morning, and he called me an hour later after he went to the oil. I don't want to make ayin hara. We saw a significant, but still it's an uphill battle, improvement. We began with Rebbe Talmud and Elon and Aperos. The relationship one has with their Elon never goes away. What my Rebbe over the past 15 years was, I'm not the Greenblatt. There hasn't been a day that I haven't thought about him. But it's already 10:26, and what? Go ask me anything you want, anything on anything.
So I guess I'll start here, but I have I want you to tell over that the story about the Bishul Lakum.
Oh, my favorite Shaila?
Yes. So Rabbi Taub was approached in shul and he was asked, "What is the strangest Shaila that he's ever had?" Right.
The most difficult Shailas I've ever had. I mean, how much time do you have? I'll tell you the Bishul Akum story because it's a fun story to debate at the Shabbos table. Maisa Shaya Kachaya, a musician from Cuba, an expatriate, comes to shul, and he was raised as a fanatical Christian. He knew Tanakh Baal Peh. He knew Lashon Kodesh. It was unbelievable. Anyway, he wanted to convert, and in those days, I was in my 20s when I came there. I used to make converts. They had to know like Shas Baal Peh, and I dealt with the basin in Toronto, usually, sometimes in Cleveland. Bli neder, I will never sit on a basin of Geras. Bli neder, bli ayin hara. So after 4 years, he finally was time to convert. I don't remember why I didn't drive him. Usually I would drive him, especially when my father was there. When my father left, I would call Rabbi Loi with Shilas. I would deal with him in the basin, Rabbi Shochet. In any event, I forget why I didn't drive him. So he calls me up at 9 o'clock at night from Toronto. He's crying. He said, "Ani Yehudi, Ani Yehudi." At L'chaim, it was Gavaldik. At 12:30 at night, my phone rings. I pick up the phone, and it's Moshe Ben Avram. He chose the name Moshe. He's living in Florida now. He's a mashgiach in one of the restaurants. That's what he does now. In any event, he calls me up and he says, Rabbi, I have my first shaila. I said, what's your shaila? He said, I'm starving. I didn't know what to eat in Toronto. So I opened up my freezer and I took out some leftover lasagna and I reheated it. I made a bracha and then I realized it's bishul akum. I made it while I was a guy. Is that not a great? Is that not a great shaila? Is that not an amazing shaila? But the truth is, in Ami, I don't want to say it's a joke. I can't write the really tough shilas. I mean, shilas I have to call it shlema about the. You want to hear a shaila? I'm thinking about what I hear. I'll tell you a shaila. I'll tell you a shaila when I was in Buffalo that I had a call Reb Shlomo, and I called Rabbi Lowy. Your Rav. Uh, I think that's why this shaila came to mind. I don't know if it's the best, but it came to mind now. I can't write this in Ami. It was another Ger's story. This was my first Ger's. She came to my office. This woman had an MD and 3 PhDs. She was a brilliant woman and single, 37 when I met her, and she was 40 years old when she converted. I say that because as we were moving along, and I already had a relationship with Rabbi Lowy and Rabbi Ox, I think was on that base. Then I don't remember. It was time. It was time for her to convert. 6 months before the conversion, she comes over to me that she's going to have to get her uterus removed, but she always wanted children, and she wanted to know if she can do artificial insemination. This is her last chance to do artificial insemination. So my feeling was she's a guy. She could do whatever she wants at this point. I mean, how could I tell her not to? But I have to ask the beis din. But I didn't want to make a fool out of myself in case it was missing some halacha and shulchan aruch. So I call her Shleima first, and her Shleima said she's a guy. She can do whatever she wants. So I called the beis, and then I called the Ray Lowy. We had a conversation about it. I wonder if he remembers, but I spoke to Ray Lowy for a little bit about it, and she becomes pregnant. That's interesting enough as it is, but that's not where the story ends. The story does not have a happy ending. So this is not unfortunately, in the new Pesach Crone book, I have 2 or 3 stories that have happy endings. They're amazing stories, but this is a real rabbinate story that keeps you up at night. So they convert. She was pregnant during the conversion. What's the halacha when you're 6 months pregnant? It's hooker ubra. She's showing. What's the halacha of the baby born after the tefillah?
No,
It's
Jewish.
yid uber yerachimai. We
Yeah.
pass it. We pass it. It's the Gemara, but okay. In any event, so I was a sandik. The whole thing was very emotional, and the kid goes to the local cheder in Buffalo. Is 3.5, and he's raised by a single mother who's a giyaris, doesn't really know. There's no husband, and they're in Buffalo. Most of our Yiddishkeit we get from Kehillah, we get from the Sviva, we get from the Bnei Torah. In Buffalo, Kiyatua, it's not simple. She's on the treadmill. She's 44 years old. She drops dead. Drops dead. And I don't remember who called me. I ran to the apartment. Her parents pretended not to know me and told me she was a Catholic and she's being cremated. And long story short, I had to take her to court, the family to court. Baruch Hashem, we were able to give her a Kfuras Yisrael. But this child who's turning 18 this year, I have to hire a private eye and find out where he is. And I have to meet him in a very public place and tell him he's a Jew. I did something very smart. I thought, what am I going to come? I'm going to meet him in a Starbucks in a few months and show him a letter from Shleima. So I called the chief rabbi of Israel at the time, who's Metzger. That's who it was at the time. And I told him the story. And I said, I need a laminated document in English and Hebrew from the state of Israel with his name and birthday saying he's a Jew. And in 6 months, that's not going to be in the Ami. But in 6 months' time, I'll let you know how that meeting went. You want to hear the story? Do we have time? Can I tell you? It's no time. I would love to tell you one of the stories in the Pesach Chrome book because it's Hafeldik. But anyway, go ask me another question.
Want to hear the story? Want to hear the question?
What?
What happened at the end?
It's not yet.
It's not yet. It's to be continued. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen.
Why was there a
No, I'm telling you. 1 second. The frustration that you're feeling is what it's like to be a rabbi. Not a rav. I'm not a rav, but you want to know what it's like to be a rabbi? It's a life of guilt and unhappy endings and anxiety. I mean, stories, unfortunately, it's just waiting for the next.
So you're not different than a balabas. You have the same life as a balabas.
This is very true. This is very true. But Azay Gatus, let's end on a happier note. Yeah, go ahead.
He wants to hear what's the Satmar Rav? You had
a 15-minute Satmar Rav story.
No, he didn't.
No. It was a Maisa with there's a very famous Rav, Rabbi Tenenbaum. Remember Eli Teitelbaum? He used to do like Torah to tape.
He was my Rebbe.
Buffalo for what? Oh no.
No, he was the tape.
No, Eli. Yeah, this Maisa is going to take me 15 minutes. His fathers are up here. It's Tu Bshvat. I can't. I want to tell you. Let me end with this Maisa. I'm going to try to make this very quick.
They called him Ailey.
Ailey, right?
Ailey, right? It's AB's friend. Yeah.
Ailey. I think he was not among the living anymore. I don't think Ailey.
I don't believe so.
He was this.
He had the tape library. He's the one who.
Right. He did the
Can I ask a question? You know what? I have a question for everybody there, and really, for Rav Goldreich. Maybe I shouldn't say this out loud. I'm not saying tales out of school. I met a chaver of mine by a chasna recently, and he told me there's a rumor there's a new Devekas coming out. Is that true? I'm being put on the spot.
AB will tell you that there's always a possibility. That's what I'll tell you.
Okay, I'm going to tell you a Maisa. So we end up on a happy note. I keep keeping you for too long. I'm going to try to make the Maisa very short. Now I'm thinking which Maisa to tell you. I'm trying to think of a very short Maisa to say. When I was in Buffalo, I'll speak about Buffalo for a second. So we used to get visitors all the time, and people would pass through constantly. Oh, I'll say this Maisa. I just thought of a different Maisa. Same opening, same psicha. I just said this Maisa at a Lev Lachem event last week, so it works out well. So we once had a Kloisenberger chassid come. His son was in the hospital there. There's Epis Cancer Center that has specialty. Baruch Hashem, his son had a shlema. So he used to give a daf yomi before mincha. Irv Fried, Olav Shalom, Buffalo, who was a tremendous master mechanech. He's the right for the Jewish Observer. He was in Columbus and then in Buffalo. For some reason, he decided after retiring in Buffalo from the cheder there to stay. So he said, I don't want to die without finishing Shas. We started a daf yomi, 2, 3, 5 people at most. But visitors would come. So the Kloisenberger Chassid is there. And by the third day he's there, I said, I want to make him feel a little bit Heimish. I'm going to say over a Divrei Yatziv, something from Rabbeinu Yekasil, the great Rebbe of Kloisenberg, Zechet Tzadik V'Kodesh, V'Ner Levrocha. So at the end of Yomi, we're getting it from him. I say, one second, I want to tell you this avart from the Divrei Yatziv tshuva he has on this sugya. So I say, the guy's happy. And Irv Fried from Buffalo, New York says, I met the Kloisenberger Rebbe like 60 years ago. I said, what? He was in the camps. How could you have met him? So Irv Fried tells me, I grew up in Borough Park on 13th Avenue when it was dirt roads. I remember the sheikhet chasing chickens down the road who escaped from his shlachleis. It was right after the Milchama. Someone a Kloisenberger can make the exact year cheshbon that the Kloisenberger Rebbe, who set up shop for a nice period of time in Union City, but right after the war, a couple of years, came to Borough Park to collect money for the She'eres HaPleita. So now the Kloisenberger Rebbe, the Kloisenberger Chassid, and me both have our mouths like, wow, what did he say? This is a crossroad of Jewish history. What did the Kloisenberger Rebbe say? So he says, I was a 13-year-old boy. I barely spoke Yiddish. I do remember he was pantomiming a gun, like going. So I said, wow, he must have collected a lot of money. Can you imagine being at that moment? The Kloisenberger Rebbe in 1946, right after liberation, coming to the shul in the Flatbush, Borough Park, and he started to laugh. Irv started to laugh. And the Kloisenberger Chassid said, well, what? What's so funny? So he said, I remember getting my coat from the coat room, and there are 3 Latzonim Balabatim there. And I heard one say to the others, that's all these rabbis ever want is money. And they all started laughing. So I said, Irv, this makes no sense. It makes zero sense that they didn't realize they were living in a moment of history. And he said to me, Rabbi Taub, nobody realizes that they're living in some distant futures past. When I moved in Buffalo, the first Rebbe in America is buried there, Rabbi Rabinovich. I'll end in 30 seconds. People now come from all over to visit his kever. He got stuck there, which is usually how people end up in Buffalo. They got stuck there. He got stuck there, and he was left there in 1911. And if you go into the Young Israel of Buffalo, they used to have a laminate from the American Hebrew, which was like the Jewish press in the turn of the century, and they had a Buffalo section. Buffalo used to be a big city. McKinley was shot there. Bekitzer, so they have a little biography, the death of Rabbi Rabinovich. Right underneath it, it has announcements in Buffalo, and it said Frederick Allman will be giving a class, 44 Delaware Avenue, November 6th, 1911. Topic: the early Jews of Buffalo. And I used to laugh when I saw that. Like, didn't Frederick Allman know he's from the early Jews of Buffalo? We're from the early Jews of Toronto. Nobody believes they're living in the past. We all believe we're living in the present. And it's such a musser. And right now, with the Milchama going on in Eretz Yisrael, with anti-Semitism, I know how bad it is in Canada, and it's horrible in New York. And we're almost used to it. I'm speaking at least for myself. We're living in such unbelievable times, and the Chol Ma'aminim Shevadai Shemai. When we say that on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, what does it mean Vadai Shemai? Hashem's name is Vadai. We daven for parnas, we daven for health. We don't daven that there should be shuls to go to and schools to go to, and right? That's a vadai. No, only Hakadosh Baruch Hu knows what's a vadai. So He gave us COVID to teach us a lesson. Don't take anything for granted. I don't know if we learned it. And now, we have security guards in front of shuls. We have security guards in front of yeshivas. People are scared to walk with a yarmulke. Israeli citizens could go to only a handful of the 198 countries in the world. All I'm pointing out that I'm really giving myself musar. We're living in that time of the Kleizim Rebbe coming for the Sheres HaPleita. They're going to be talking about this moment, Mirz Hashem is Mana Mashiach, and as Chazal tell us in many places, when Mashiach comes, we're going to be given Divrei Hayamim Chela Gimel, a new Divrei Hayamim, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to write down our stories, and it's going to be read to our bandim, Bnei Vincha, and the Mirz Hashem will see our names in it, not being with Sandim, davening more and learning more and having more Avas HaTorah and Avas Yisrael, so that we can be Zeicha for Shalom, V'Shalva, Levetach, that should come b'mheira b'yameinu.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much.
Now I'm going to have a drink.
Gotta go back to your simcha.
I'm done. I dealt with Toronto. It's too much. All right. Be gesund.
So you got to speak here. Come speak into here so you can hear you.
On.
Where do you go? He left.
Hello?
Oh, he didn't know.
Okay, you didn't know.
His cousin, Dr. Grossman, next door to him.
Cousin? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
To the
Because he sent him an email.
Christians.
His email.
Their Julian
Close your
calendar
eyes.
puts theirs
I know.